Okay, very big welcome tonight from Pennine Ham, new amateur radio club. We started last August in the Pennines, the Pennine Hills of the north of England. But we've taken with us a whole bunch of people who joined us when a number of us were part of another club here up in Yorkshire, who liked what we did with our Zoom meetings, on online activities, and our portable work and encouraging portable operating and helping people build antennas and so on, all those sorts of things that we're trying to do inside Pennine Ham. Many of those people that found us then have come with us to Pennine Ham and joined the club. Although we also, when we run our regular meetings, and this is for Tim's benefit, really, our speaker tonight, when we run our regular meetings, we open them up to everyone interested in amateur radio. And over the period of time that we've been running these under Pennine Ham, we've had a number of new people come along out of interest to see us, and then, funny enough, they keep coming back and join the club. So we started the club last August with 38 people at the inaugural meeting. We're now up to 88 members in the club, which I think is fantastic. Many of them, of course, and we've got quite a few who are working regularly in the evenings, do shifts in places at night time, can't come along all the time to our meetings on an evening, but I know they'll be watching our YouTube channel. I know some of them will be joining our digital net we run on a Thursday night, and so on. So it's been a very successful and very, very enjoyable start to what we've been doing. We joined the National Ham Fest last year, had a stall down there, made a bunch of new friends down there. We have went up to the NASA, the Blackpool Rally, a few weekends ago up in Blackpool, had a great time there, meeting some new people. We've had great fun with Martin, M1MRB, and the ICQ podcast, and a number of the ICQ presenters joined the club as well, and that's been great as well. And we're lovely to both to support the podcast and see Martin and the others when they can do pop into our meetings. So Tim, that's an introduction to us. Tonight, the reason why I made contact with you, I know you write regularly, Tim, in the amateur radio magazines here in the UK, both in Practical Wireless and in Radcom, and great to have you here. One of our routes to finding speakers at the club is to look and see who's been writing in QST, Radcom, Practical Wireless, and so on about interesting subjects, and making contact with them. And I saw that you were writing about using satellites in amateur radio, almost like a beginner's guide to using satellites. And we thought that would be great. We haven't had anyone come along to give us a talk on that yet. And although we have got one or two club members who do that, one of them who can't be here tonight, sent me a note this afternoon saying that he was able to get on and make a QSO through AO50 this morning before going to work. So he's a regular user of satellites and plays with them quite a lot with his ICOM 705. So Tim, no more from me. I'll hand the microphone to you and let you take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for the introduction, and it's great to see you. Well done on the club. Sounds like it's going really well. You know, anybody who's got almost 90 members, that's a really good club. So fantastic. So yeah, this evening I'd like to talk a little bit about satellites. Now I've got some slides prepared, so I don't know whether you'll need to give me. You might be okay.
Oh, you're okay. You can share.
Yeah, looks like we might be all right. So, all being well, can you see some slides?
We can.
Lovely. So, welcome to Wales. Lovely to be with you. And I'm going to take you through a bit of an introduction to satellite operating. I'm fully aware that some of you already know quite a bit about satellite operating, so forgive me if there's nothing too much new for you, but hopefully there's going to be something of interest to people. I started this off as a talk about simple satellite operating, and I thought, well, actually, I'm going to include a couple of slightly different things which maybe get a little bit more complex. So I've called it mostly simple satellite operating, but hopefully it'll be enough to get you interested and give you some information about where to start. So what's my background in satellite operating? Well, I suppose one of the first things I wanted to tell you was that satellite operating doesn't need to be really complicated. It's often portrayed that way, and you know, I was watching the live stream of the RSGB convention at a couple of years ago, and they were doing some sort of vox pop interviews from the bar or wherever, and they interviewed various people, and somebody came on and said, you know, my real goal, and she made it sound like it was going to be something really quite complex, is to have a contact through a satellite. And I thought, crumbs, let's chat for 10 minutes and I can tell you how to do it. So I think there's this perception that it can be quite complicated. I've put there the obvious line: you don't have to be a rocket scientist. And you really don't need sort of really complex stuff. You know, I think when I first started playing around with amateur radio and had a sort of read about satellite operation and so on, I thought, you know, you had to have these complex elevation rotors and, you know, and so on and so forth. You don't have to do that, although if you want to build a completely automated elevation and azimuth system, you know, all driven from your PC, and it controls the Doppler on your radio as well, you can do that, and it's brilliant fun to do it. You don't have to do that to make some contacts. So we'll start really simple and then sort of move through to some of the more advanced things, but nothing that you couldn't have a go at pretty easily. Well, I started off on satellites probably before some of you were born, which is slightly alarming, actually. I was first licensed as a G6 TTU back in 1983, I think it was. And at that time, a Class B license, which a G6 call was, you couldn't get on HF. And as a shortwave listener, I'd always been really interested in, you know, listening to DX and so on. And I was working hard at my Morse code, but you know, that was a little way off. And I discovered that although you couldn't use HF as a Class B licensee, what you could do was you could use satellites. And at the time, we had some Mode A satellites, which were 2 meters up and 10 meters down. And as a Class B licensee, you were actually allowed to do that because you were transmitting on 2 meters and the satellite was transmitting on 10 meters. So no license conditions were being broken. So that's all good. And I had a great time. You know, as a Class B licensee, I used these the RS satellites. They're a bunch of Russian satellites, and they're all 2 meters up, 10 meters down, and you could work all sorts of things. Like, you know, I was thrilled to work across into the US for the first time. That was fun, and there were, you know, nice bits of DX like OX3WS. From Greenland, and I remember working stations down in the Ivory Coast. And goodness, yeah, what a great introduction to working DX that was. Anyway, of course, I then passed my Morse test, and you know, kind of forgot about satellites for quite a while. But a few years ago, I was when Twitter was a nice place to be. I saw some tweets from Pete 2E0SQL, who's now moved to Scotland, and he's 2M0SQL. And Pete was into satellite operating, and he put some pictures up of working a satellite with a handheld Yagi and the FT817 under his arm. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I hadn't really thought about you being able to make satellite contacts with the sort of handheld equipment. I thought that's quite neat. I wonder if I could do that. So I'll sort of talk you through how that evolved. But I think, you know, one of the nice things about satellite operation is no matter where you live, as long as you can see a bit of sky, then you can potentially make some contacts through satellites. I mean, it's obviously better if you're lucky enough to have a really low horizon and you can see satellites, just as they come up over the horizon. That's fantastic, and it's brilliant fun. I'm lucky enough to have that here. But even if you're in the bottom of a valley surrounded by mountains, in theory, you can make some interesting VHF contacts on satellites. So that was something I really liked, the idea that you could get on from anywhere. So having seen Pete playing around on, I think it was SO50 at the time, I thought, well, I wonder what I can do with that. And the very first thing I tried was just with a handheld receiving on the satellite's downlink frequency, just on the rubber duck. And I did get some very weak signals from the SO50 satellite when it was overhead. And we'll talk a bit about SO50 and what it does and how it works in a little while. So that was sort of quite encouraging. I suppose that was only a few seconds of audio. And since then there have been satellites come along which you can receive very much better on a handheld system, although regrettably some of those aren't working as well as they were. But there's lots you can do with simple equipment. So I suppose one of the first things we should talk about is aerials. It's always good to talk about aerials, and what do you need to make a satellite contact? Well, realistically, on 2 meters and 70 sems, you need some sort of beam aerial. There are times when you can use not necessarily a rubber duck, but maybe a whip antenna or something like that. That will work sometimes, but I think if you're starting out, it's good to have a little bit more gain to let you're getting into the satellite until you know what you're doing. So what options are there? Well, if you look at the AMSAT UK shop, there are 1 or 2 aerials that you can pick up from them. When I started satellite operating, the only one there was, I think, the ELK antenna, and that's a log periodic for 2 meters and 70 sems. Not the cheapest. These dual band aerials, sort of portable aerials, don't tend to be terribly cheap, but they do work well. So the ELK's really good. Arrow make a series of good portable Yagis, dual band Yagis. There are some sort of quite small ones which are easy to handheld. There's a huge one called the Alaskan Arrow, and that's really, really good if you want to try and capture a satellite out at a huge distance. But it's quite long, it's quite heavy, and I'm here to tell you that satellite passes last about 10 minutes, and even the smaller Yagi, after you've been holding it out at arm's length for 10 minutes, can feel quite heavy. So you probably go for something a little bit lighter in the short term. Moonray can make a dual band 2 meter 70 sems Yagi. I think that's a little bit heavier than some of the others, but it's still usable. I've certainly made some contact with one of those. And there's all sorts of things that you can make up yourself. You could just as an experiment, I've used separate Yagis, HP9CVs for 2 meters and 70 sems, and connected up to separate handhelds, and that made some QSOs. So that was interesting. You'll also find some designs for Yagis made out of the metal tape measures and so on. So have a look online and see if you like any of those options. I don't ever like to tell people, don't try and do this, don't do that. One of the things I would say is be very wary of using your collinear antenna on satellites. It does work, and it can work quite well, but don't use it for something like SO50. Why is that? The reason is SO50 has got a very good receiver. It's got quite a low power transmitter. So you can potentially be getting into SO50 and in fact sort of swamping the receiver, but not necessarily hearing it. So you do get instances where people have a listen on the SO50 downlink. Oh, I can't hear anything, so maybe I'll put a CQ call out. Not such a bad idea, but of course they can't hear the satellite because it's in one of the nulls overhead of their collinear. But the transmit's going through it, and they very quickly become unpopular with satellite operators. So do be mindful of that. There are times when you can use a vertical aerial for satellite operating, and I must admit I do it sometimes here when the satellite's very low down on the horizon. And I know if the satellite's below about 10 degrees, I can probably kind of hear it okay on the vertical, but work out what you're hearing first of all. So just be a little bit careful there. Well, what about rigs for FM satellite operation? And we are going to start talking about FM satellites to start with. We'll go on a little bit later to talk about SSB, CW, and for Jeff in particular FT4. Jeff will tell you all about FT4 on satellites. But let's start off with FM. Well, preferably what you want is full duplex. What do I mean by full duplex? It means that as I transmit, I can hear what's coming back. So why is that important? Well, it is important because if you transmit and you're not coming through the satellite, you might as and somebody else is coming through it. Because as you can imagine, an FM satellite is essentially like a repeater in the sky. And as you all know, only one person can use an FM repeater at a time. So if you're transmitting and you're not getting through the satellite because somebody else has got a better path to it, or better aerial, or more power, or all these options, it's pointless. So it's good to have full duplex to be able to hear what's going on and whether you're getting through the satellite or not. So that's the official words from AMSAT, and quite right too. Trouble is, there aren't many full duplex rigs around these days, particularly in terms of handhelds. With mobile rigs, you've got some quite good options. I realised as I was looking at the slide this evening, I've been rather Yaesu biased. I put things like Yaesu FT8800, 8900, and the newer FTM 400s and 500s. Those are all full duplex rigs, so you can transmit, say, on 2 meters and listen on 77. So that's really good, and they're full duplex. The problem arises if you want to use a handheld. I don't think there is a handheld out there at the moment that's currently made, currently available, that's full duplex. So you are stuck with half duplex. It's not the end of the world, and I've certainly made plenty of contacts with handhelds which are half duplex, and you just have to just make a short transmission and see if you're getting through, and you get an idea of how strong the satellite has to be to get in with whatever you've got. Say a handheld which runs 5 watts and a beam aerial. You get a sense of when you're going to get through it and when you're not, and it all depends how busy the satellite is and that sort of thing. If you do use a dual band mobile, like those rigs we talked about, a lot of those rigs will run 50 watts. Please don't run 50 watts through the satellite. You don't need to. Generally, around 10 watts will be sufficient. We'll talk a little bit later about the International Space Station and the cross-band repeater on there. I think there's an argument possibly for running a little bit more power on there, but largely sort of between 10 and 25 watts is pretty adequate. And don't feel you need to have an all singing, all dancing sort of handheld. I'm lucky enough to review some of the handhelds for the mags, as perhaps some of you know. And there's a huge difference, isn't there? There's the Quanshengs at 10 quid or whatever. I love the Quanshengs, by the way. You can do so many cool things with them. But that's a discussion for another evening. And then you get the expensive handhelds. I just had a look at one of the new Icon ones, and I think it's about 550 quid. I think 550 quid for a handheld, that's a lot of money, isn't it? Very nice handheld, it is. But you don't have to buy one of those really expensive handhelds. It's something like a Baofeng or a Quansheng or whatever will, as long as you run 5 watts or so, and put it into your beam aerial, that will suffice. Obviously, if you've got a nice satellite capable rig like an IC9700 or slightly more old school, an FT847 like I've got, then that will do full duplex and allows you to operate the satellites really easily. And of course, those rigs will also work really nicely for SSB, CW, and data modes as well, on the linear transponders. But hopefully, with these things, there's you're looking at that, and if you're thinking, oh, I'd quite like to have a go at satellite operation, you've already got one of those rigs, maybe a mobile, maybe a handheld, or if you're into the UK activity contests on 2 meters and 70 sems, maybe you've got a 9700 or something like that. So all being well, you've got something that you can use already. Well, before we go too much further in talking about satellite operations, I've popped up a slide about Doppler shift. I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with Doppler shift, and I think we're all familiar with it with emergency vehicles as they come towards you. The tone of the sirens goes up, and then it goes past you, and it goes down, and all that stuff. It's quite fun. Well, of course, exactly the very same thing happens on RF. Now, on 2 meters, you don't really notice the difference. If you've got a satellite, let's take the something like the International Space Station, it travels at around 17,500 miles an hour, which is quite speedy compared to your average emergency vehicle, particularly in traffic. So you can imagine that there's a potential for some Doppler shift to take place there. Well, on 2 meters, the good news is that you don't really notice. It does, as far as FM is concerned, it perhaps with the satellite coming towards you on 2 meters, it might raise the frequency by a kilohertz or something like that. But as far as operating on FM, at least, that's nothing to notice. Nothing to worry about at all. On 70 sems, the effect is much more noticeable. And if you say got a nominal frequency of, I don't know, 436795, something like that, then if the satellite's coming straight towards you, and of course it isn't always coming straight towards you, but the worst case as far as Doppler shift is concerned is that it's coming straight towards you. That will put the apparent frequency of the satellite up by about 10 kilohertz as it comes towards you. So when it comes over the horizon, it'll be sort of 10 kilohertz higher than you expect it to be. And as it sort of approaches you, the Doppler shift will get a bit less. As it's of course it's the frequency moves very, very quickly as it moves overhead. And then as it goes overhead, the Doppler shift will mean that the frequency of the satellite is back its nominal frequency, and then it'll start to drop. So if you're say receiving on 70 sems like you have to for SO50, what I do is set up 5 different memories, one on say 436,805, the next one on 436. Well, sorry, I'll probably start on 810. 436.810, one on 436.805, then one on 800, then one on 795, and then one on 790. And so it's really nice and simple. As the satellite comes towards you, you just sort of go down, click through those memories, and the satellite will stay in tune. How do you know if you haven't got the Doppler shift right? The FM's all choppy and you won't be able to understand it. I'm sure you know what an FM signal sounds like if you're just off frequency or something. It sounds like that. So that's the way I deal with 77s satellites if I'm receiving or if I'm transmitting. So if if say it's a 77s up transmit satellite and downlink on 2 meters, you can do the same sort of thing, and you just listen to the downlink and just adjust through the memories to make sure that you've got a clear signal coming through. So Doppler shift is absolutely fine to deal with, and it's really easy on FM once you get used to it. So just set up those 5 different memories, and you'll be all set. So yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about SO50. There are some other FM satellites around, but SO50 has been pretty reliable for 23 years. It was launched back in 2002 by a Saudi group. The uplink is on 145.850, and the nominal downlink frequency is on 436.795. A bit like a repeater, you'll need a CTCSS tone set of 67 Hertz. When SO50 hasn't been in range of any signals for a while, it turns its transmitter off to save batteries. So if you think, oh, SO50 should be over now, but I can't hear anything, it's sometimes worth a quick blip on the uplink, and rather than the 67 Hertz, transmit a tone of 74.4 Hertz, and that will spark it back into life and give you another, I think it's 10 minutes operation or something like that. So that can be a useful tip sometimes. SO50 and most of the low Earth orbiting satellites orbit about every 100 minutes, and you'll get probably 4 or 5 passes every day. Sometimes you get some passes in the morning and some passes in the evening. We'll talk about path predictions in a second. But yeah, it comes around about every 100 minutes or so. So I think we talked a lot about that. Satellite normally appears around 800, 805, and then Doppler's down. If you've got a handheld Yagi that you're using, it's pretty easy to track it across the sky. We'll talk about how you know where it is in the sky in a second. It doesn't move really fast. If you get the sense that it's going to come all the way from the horizon straight across you, and then sort of go back down onto the horizon, 180 degrees, roughly speaking, to where it rose, then that's all in about 10 minutes. So it's just a steady movement across the sky. So it's you soon get a sense of where it'll be, and follow the path, particularly if you've got a program to give you some guidance. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Particularly when you're starting out, it's quite fun to find somewhere with a nice low horizon, because then you will hear it come up over the horizon, and you've got a nice clear shot at it, and see what you can hear. If it's out over the SO50, if you get the right sort of pass, you can just about make it across the Atlantic with one, so that can be good fun. And out to the east, you can work into Russia and so on. So again, that can be quite interesting. So a nice low horizon is your friend. But inevitably, if you want to try it from your back garden, there'll be houses, there'll be trees around, and that'll work just fine. You just won't hear it for a while after it rises, and you probably just get maybe 5 minutes time on the pass as it's much sort of higher up in the sky. What other satellites are there? Well, AO91 was a really good satellite. That was a 77s up 2 meters down, and you could hear that on just about anything. You know, handheld, and I made some really nice QSOs for that. I have very fond memories of it. It's still around. Unfortunately, its batteries are almost dead, but you know, when it's been getting some sunlight for a while, it does occasionally appear. So that can be a good one to listen for, but you know, it is prone to going off, you know, mid-pass and all sorts of funny things. But you can still make some contact with it, which is nice. The International Space Station has got a crossband repeater on it. There's several things on it actually, but it has got a crossband repeater on it, and we'll talk about that in a second. That can get very busy, but you know, that's quite a good satellite to listen for. All right, well, before we get sort of look too much further, I suppose one of the things that would be useful to tell you about is, well, how do you know when the satellite's going to come over? How do you know where it's going to be in the sky and so on? And there are, you know, various programs that you can use to do that. If you're in the shack, you know, things like gpredict, which runs on either Windows or Linux. I think that's free. Works very well. I know it's free, in fact. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi. In fact, I ran that on a Raspberry Pi for many years, and it worked very well. If you want to do things like controlling a, you know, IC9700 or an FP847, that PC32 is a really nice bit of software. You do have to pay some money for it to register it. Only runs under Windows, but that's you know, that's a very tiny bit of software. If you're out and about portable, I tend to use a bit of software on my smartphone. I'm an iOS user. I use one called GoSatWatch that I think you pay $4.99 for or something like that. It's quite nice. Got some quite nice facilities. But there are some free ones. ISS Detector, I think, is free, and that runs on both iOS and Android. AMSAT Droid is a freebie one for Android. So there are several programs, and there's loads I haven't mentioned there. But you know, there's plenty of programs that are around, and they'll tell you, you know, where the satellite's going to rise, how high it's going to get in the sky, what's the maximum elevation, and all those sorts of things. And some of them will even tell you, you know, what frequency the satellite will be heard on, and what frequency you should transmit on, and so on. So that can be quite interesting. There's a website I've popped on there, satmatch.com, which is run by K5EM. And that's quite an interesting one because it helps you work out if you've got a mutual footprint. So you know, if you get into it a bit more and you think, oh, I want to work, you know, this guy over in the States or something like that, and you can type in your locator, his locator, your height above sea level, his height above sea level, and you know, which satellites you'd like to use. It will work out, you know, the passes that you might be able to hear each other on. So that can be quite nice for making sceds. So that gives you a bit of an idea of you know, finding out where satellites are and so on. All right, what about the International Space Station? Well, lots going on with that. I'm sure many of you have perhaps listened to the occasional activity on 145-800. I know Jeff does, when there are schools contacts made, and you probably listen, but you have an astronaut on the ISS and they're answering questions from school children about, you know, what it's like to be in space, and the kids very often ask some quite insightful questions, quite interesting to listen to. So I'm sure many of you have listened to those sorts of QSOs. So if you monitor channels if you've got a scanner going in the shack, monitoring the local repeater of various channels or whatever, 145-800 is a pretty good one to listen to as well. And it's it's really good fun when you hear this really big signal come up and hear from the space station. So that can be good to listen for. There's a packet radio digipeater, APRS. I'm sure some of you have played with APRS on terrestrial frequencies, but there's an APRS digi on the International Space Station, and that works on 145.825, and that can be quite fun to play with. You can sort of send packet radio messages through the digipeater and have these kind of fun packet exchange QSOs with people. And you can do that with a handheld. It's kind of easier to do if you've got a keyboard and doing it through a beam aerial or something like that, and you tap away on your keyboard. But that's kind of easy, isn't it? So it's much more fun to have this tiny keyboard on your handheld and try and say hello or something like that and get it through the APRS digipeater. I've done that a few times. It's good fun. There's a crossband repeater on the International Space Station. The downlink is on 437-800, and the uplink is on 145-990. You'll need a CT-CFS tone again of 67 hertz to get through that. That does get really, really busy, and if it's over mainland Europe, it can be really difficult to get into. However, it's not disastrous. I'm lucky enough to be sort of out here on the western side of the country, and if the ISS is out over the Atlantic, if you can see it quite low down, then it's not quite so busy, and you can potentially make some quite interesting QSOs then. And the same is true at night as well. Ken was talking about being on the air at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and if the ISS is going over at that time, I think it's probably fair to say it's not going to be quite as busy at that sort of time. So time or location can be your friend. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is you might well hear that and you might have a go. If you're in the middle of the day and it's a very high elevation pass, which is in range of Central Europe, then don't be too discouraged if you don't get through. Do try again when things perhaps might be a little bit quieter. There's also a non-amateur frequency that is quite interesting to listen to sometimes, 143.625. Obviously not for making contacts through, but you'll occasionally hear a really strong signal come up on there on FM, and generally Russian heard on there. So if any of you speak Russian, that can be quite interesting. And you'll sometimes also hear, if there's a spacewalk going on, you'll sometimes hear that repeated back through 143.625. But actually, if there is a spacewalk going on, quite fun to listen to the frequencies I popped on the screen there. 121.275 and 121.200 in the air band. Those are actually the frequencies used by the spacesuits of the astronauts, and I think 130.167 is the frequency used by the ISS. And it seems remarkable, doesn't it, to think about you can receive a signal from somebody in a spacesuit, but there's not a lot between you, is there? So it makes good sense that they're actually a decent signal. But I think despite those frequencies being in the air band, they're not AM, they're FM frequencies. So worth having a listen if you see a spacewalk going on. Talked about westerly or late night passes. SSTV events, this happens quite frequently. The Russians seem quite keen on the SSTV events. and they sort of for several days they'll transmit a series of SSTV images, which you can have a go at decoding, and that can be quite fun to do. I'll show you some sample pictures in a little while. A little bit more about the ISS APRS digipeater. If you've got a handheld, some handhelds do APRS. You know, there's a Kenwood one that does the THD 72, 74, and 75. I think they all do it. And some of the Yaesu ones, the FT2, FT3, and FT5, they've all got APRS built in. So you can probably just about use one of those with a standard rubber duck aerial if the ISS is directly overhead. But if you get I think I've got something. It's a MFJ antenna, and it's a half wave on 2 meters. I think it's called something like the Long Ranger. It's wonderful. It's, I guess about 1 meter long, and that works really well on an APRS handheld, and you can bat signals back and forth through the ISS. If you're used to using APRS terrestrially, you will need to change your unproto path from whatever it's set to, probably something like wide 2-1, and you'll need to set it to either ARISS or RS0ISS, and then the digipeater on the space station will repeat your signal. If you want to play around with that and you haven't got a APRS capable handheld, you can have a go at receiving signals on APRS, and of course you can try this out with terrestrial APRS as well. You can use the sound card modem software that I've suggested there, and there's some terminal software written by ON6MU, which is really good for typing messages and working through the space station. Really good for quick-fire QSOs. But you could, even if you just set up the sound card modem, that means you don't need a TNC or anything flash. It's all done in the computer. You just take the output of your receiver. It could be a scanner. It could be your regular 2-meter receiver. Stick the receiver on 145825. Run the sound card modem software on your computer. Set it up to receive 1200 baud packet, and as the space station comes over, hopefully you'll receive a few packets. So that could be quite fun. I mean, the very simplest setup I've used is a handheld on 145.825. And you really can use your cheapy Quansheng or your Baofeng or whatever. And there's some packet decoders that you can run on your phone, whether it's iOS or Android, and just you don't need the lead, just audio coupling between the handheld and the smartphone, and hopefully you'll detect a few packets. It probably won't work when it's out on the horizon, but as the signal gets nice and strong as it comes overhead, you should decode a few packets. So that if you've not done any of that, might be fun to have a play with. Here are some examples of SSTV pictures received from the ISS, not by me, by my friend Dave M0GIW. Who's a real specialist in satellite comms and does all sorts of cool stuff. Dave's up in Doncaster, and some quite fun pictures here. There's a picture of Owen W5LFL. Owen was the first guy to operate from space on the amateur radio bands, and I think that was last year, and that was the 40th anniversary. The scary thing is I actually remember So W5LFL operated from the space shuttle, and I remember going up onto a hill. I lived in Gloucestershire at the time, and a group of us went up, and we were really excited because we heard W5LFL operating from the space shuttle. Of course, we didn't have a QSO with him. He didn't hear us, and so on and so forth. But it was still very memorable, and one of my sort of earliest recollections of amateur radio in space. And it was quite nice actually, because W5LFL's son Richard, I can't remember what it's called, 5KW something. Anyway, his son Richard has been active from the space station as well, and I've heard him. It's yeah, the SSTV can be quite good fun, and lots of people are interested in trying to decode the pictures, and it's surprising how strong the signals can be. If you want to have a go at doing that, I would recommend what you do, rather than trying to get an SSTV decoder and receiving the pictures directly as the space station comes over. Why not concentrate on getting a really good audio recording of the signal? You might be able to do with one of the handhelds that say records onto a micro SD card or something like that, or just with a mobile phone or something like that, just hooked up and with audio coupling. That will work surprisingly well. But if you go outside with a handheld and just try and keep the signal as strong as you can, and you'll find that you have to move the aerial round a little bit through it's a very much 3D thing. You move it back and forward to try and pick the signal up. Get the signal as strong as you can, and get a nice audio recording of the SSTV, and then later put that audio recording back through an SSTV decoder, and then of course you've got multiple opportunities to play with the SSTV decoder and try tweaking various parameters and so on, and perhaps you get some quite nice pictures that way. Another technique, of course, if you've got a SDR receiver, you can make a IQ type recording of the satellite as it comes over, and again play that back and look at the SSTV that way. All right. So that was the simple satellite operating. Don't worry, we're going to move to slightly less simple now, but just a couple of things I wanted to talk about. Linear transponders is the first thing. Well, what's a linear transponder? Linear transponder is a satellite which picks up a chunk of spectrum on one band and spits it out on another band. Nothing more complicated than that. So most of the time, it'll say receive on 2 meters. It'll receive a chunk of about 10 kcs, 10, 15, 20 kcs on 2 meters, and spit that same 20 kcs out on 70 centimeters. Now, most of the transponders that I can think of are what are called inverted transponders. So if you transmit low in the pass band on, say, 2 meters, you'll come out high in the pass band on 70 centimeters. And even more fun, what you have to do, if you want to come out on USB on 70 centimeters, you have to transmit on lower sideband on 2 meters. And you soon get used to it, but it's quite interesting if you haven't come across it before. The linear transponders to probably talk about at the moment are RS-44 and AO7. RS-44 is a Russian satellite. AO7 was 50 fairly recently. Well, it's probably heading towards 51 now. It was launched 50 odd years ago, and it was up for, I don't know, a few years, 4 or 5 years, and then its batteries died, and I suppose everybody thought, oh, that's the last we hear of AO7, and then sort of 30 years later or whatever, people started noticing, oh, we can hear AO7 again. That's kind of cool. And of course, what had happened was that the batteries on AO7 had gone open circuit. So when the solar panels of the satellite were illuminated, the solar panels generated just enough power to run the transponders. So if you listen to AO7 when it's well, and it has had a couple of dodgy moments recently, so hopefully it's going to be okay. But you might hear it sounding quite chirpy. You know, those of you who've been around a while might remember the old Russian signals, which were quite chirpy, and it sounds a little bit like that from time to time. And that's just because there isn't quite enough power to keep the transmitter stable, but you can still use it. Something you do need to be really careful of though, because AO7 the battery is well, there is no battery, but there isn't very much power in the transponder. Don't overload it, because if you put too much power on the uplink, it'll actually swamp the receiver. And the receiver will throw up its hands and say, "I haven't got enough power to repeat this really strong signal. The power budget of the satellite isn't enough," and it resets and goes off, and you'll be very unpopular. So please don't do that. Generally, 5 or 10 watts is for a beam on SSB is quite enough to get through AO7. If you want to do CW or sideband, you need full duplex capability. So either 2 rigs, one multi-mode 2 meters, one for 70 FEM, or something nice like a 9700 or an 847 that you can transmit and on 2 meters, and transmit on 70 FEMs and receive on 2 meters. So you need to be able to hear your signal coming back, because you need to find yourself, which takes a bit of getting used to. If you want to have a play around with this, and you haven't got a portable system, or you haven't got elevation, then concentrate on the passes that are quite low on the horizon, and you'll do quite well. If you've got horizontal beams for 2 meters and 70 FEMs, those will probably work very well up to about 10 or 12 degrees elevation. And of course, those passes are where the DX up is anyway, so really interesting. So just have a play with those, and forget about when the satellite's a bit higher. And you have to find your signal on the downlink, which can take a little bit of doing. There's some spreadsheets to help you do that. If you've got a pan adapter on your rig, then that makes things a little bit easier as well. And Jeff is always telling me about the interesting QSOs that he's making on FT4, and indeed that's gaining popularity on the linear transponders. So if you're not keen on CW or sideband, then that can be another possibility of making some satellite contacts. And I'm sure Jeff will give you some hints and tips on doing that. I haven't done that, so that's quite interesting. Something else you can potentially look at is the QO100 geostationary satellite. So the nice thing about that is you don't need to turn your beam, you don't have to do anything, just like your satellite TV. You just point a dish at the sky, and the satellite is there all the time. The satellite is 10 gigs down and 13 FEMs up. And if you're sort of thinking, oh crumbs, I don't do microwaves, it's not quite as bad as you think. The uplink could be something like an Adam Pluto, or one of the line boards potentially, and that allows you to generate some RF on 13 FEMs. You probably need some filtering and a small amplifier. And Wi-Fi amplifiers work quite well for that. A friend of mine uses a Wi-Fi amplifier, and that goes very well on the uplink. On the downlink, you can use a satellite LMB and feed that into a RTL SDR dongle. And I think it comes out about 600 megs or something like that. So use your RTL SDR dongle and some software, and you'll be able to hear the CW and the sideband coming down. And you can use a sky dish. You know, a lot of people use one of the camping sky dishes to do that, and it works quite well. So that's the narrowband system. If you're into TV, then there's wideband TV on QO100 as well. And there's some software just come out written by Simon GW4VXE, who's the genius behind SDR console. And Simon's written some software called SDR television, and that's very much focused on working with things like the add-on Pluto and so on, and working with the QO100 satellites. So that might be worth a look. Going back to narrowband, CW and sideband, a lot of the expeditions use QO100 actually. Could be quite a nice way. Some of the pile-ups for expeditions on QO100 can be quite intense. But I was talking to Dave M0GIW yesterday, and he was telling me his dad, Jim, EI3DP. Jim's worked over 100 countries on QO100 now, all on CW. So that's quite nice. If you want to have a listen to QO100 and you haven't got the kit at the moment, you can listen to it on the web. If you Google Goonhilly SDR QO100, you'll find there's a website that you can listen to one of these online SDRs, and you can listen to QO100 and get a sense of what it's about. And perhaps if it captures your imagination, you can then start playing around with a receive system, and there are various ways of doing the uplink. There are some people in DX Patrol in Portugal. They produce a converter from 77s up to 13, which you can then drive through a Wi-Fi amplifier and a dish, and that works quite well as well. So it's not too difficult to get onto QO100, and can be quite interesting. But quite a different sort of approach to the low Earth orbiting satellites, which you have to track across the sky. All right, well, you'll perhaps be relieved to know that I'm getting towards the end, but I hope this has been sort of interesting to you. If you want to find out more, AMSAT UK is the place to go. Good organisation to be part of if you're interested in satellites. Oscar News that comes out every few months is interesting to read, and of course you're also supporting AMSAT in their quest to launch more satellites, and you're providing a bit of financial support to do that. So yeah, definitely recommend AMSAT UK or AMSAT in wherever you're living to support satellite operation. I should have changed that slide actually. I'm not a great fan of X since Elon Musk got hold of it. But there used to be a really good group of satellite hams on Twitter, and that used to be a really good place to make some scads or get some information about operating on satellites. And I know a couple of people who are on here this evening have taken part in that in the past. I must admit I've left Twitter not a nice place to be these days, in my view. But I have gone over onto Blue Sky, and some of the satellite community have gone over there, so that can be quite good to find out stuff as well. If you have any questions, I'll be delighted to try and answer them this evening. But if you think of something later, and I wish I'd asked Tim about that, or don't want to ask me now because I know it's a bit strange online sometimes, feel free to email me, GW4VXE@icloud.com. I'll be really happy to tell you what I know. If I don't know the answer, I can probably point you in the direction of somebody who will know the answer. So I think with that, I'm probably going to hit my stop share button and say thank you very much for listening. I hope you found something of interest there. And I shall pass it back to Nick and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Tim. That was extremely good and very enjoyable and very useful, I'm sure, to lots of people. So I'm sure we've got people in the room with questions that they've got to raise. I've got the first one is Michael, EI6JMB, or you're just waving at us, Michael. I think that was he was congratulating you, I think, Tim. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Mike. I look forward to working with you sometime. I have a very nice path into Southern Ireland from here, so that might be a possibility.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, anyone with a question or comment to Tim there? Who wants to go first? Yeah, Keith.
Have you used egg beater or turnstile antennas for 2 and 70 on a fixed location at all?
I haven't. No, I haven't. I know anytime egg beaters get mentioned on some of the satellite forums, it all gets a bit nasty, and people say, "Oh, they're rubbish. They're rubbish." I don't think that's necessarily true, but they're probably okay for receiving things, like weather satellites and so on. But I think for probably transmitting, it's probably a little bit more patchy. Turnstiles, again, work really, really well for receiving signals. I suspect they're not quite so great for transmitting on, but no, that's certainly a possibility. I think, handheld, if you want something simple, a handheld Yagi is probably the way to go. But, I always say to people, whether it's satellites, HF, VHF, whatever, the only antenna that really doesn't work at all is the one that you don't put up. So if the only thing that you can put up is an egg beater, give it a go. Don't expect it to, do the world. I'm sure you'll make some people do make some contacts with them, and I think they work okay, but there'll be limitations, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
All right, okay. Yeah, because I've got an old Yaesu FT736R here. So
right.
Dying to try it out.
Oh yeah. No, they're nice radios, I think, and I think it's got a satellite board, so you can operate full duplex and.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, satellite mode on it for sure.
Yeah.
Just get him a head around the frequencies.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, that. Apologies, I didn't put too much about the frequencies in the presentation, but it's all on the web. If you look on the AmSite website, you've got all the uplink and downlink frequencies. And if you get into the linear transponders, there's a really neat spreadsheet by, I can't remember his call site, it's something like K0HBR, but if you Google Excel spreadsheet satellite transponder frequencies, I'm sure you'll find it. And if that doesn't come up with anything, send me an email, I'll find it and send it to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Anyone else with a question to put to Tim?
I'm just scanning back through the chat, and thanks to Jan P0SAT for answering all the questions brilliant.
Yeah, and I've just typed onto the chat in YouTube, Tim. If anyone's got any questions there, do feel free to type them in there and we can put them to you. So.
Oh, and Nick M1DDD, who knows quite a bit about satellites as well. Nick, thank you for saying AMSAT Argentina website has a good live path predictor, as does hams.at page. Yeah, so those are two really good ones to look at. And yeah, Nick's got some YouTube videos which are good on satellite. I've seen some of those, so thank you for reminding me, Nick. Look for G6RBY or M1DDD on YouTube. Tim's asked, satellite mode on the VX6R. I don't think there is. Oh yeah, Nick, thank you. K0PBR frequency cheat sheet. That's the Excel spreadsheet I was trying to remember. Tim, yeah, satellite mode. I don't know. There isn't on the VX6. What's it? It's the FT5, something like that. That's not quite full duplex, but you can use it certainly. I don't know the VX6, so I'd have to look at that. But if you get stuck, email me. I'll do my best to help. Oh, and Jan very kindly said IAU satellite coordination page for detailed information, and it's provided a link to that. So that's marvelous. So thank you for the chat support, guys. Very much appreciated.
Lovely, thank you very much. Jeff, ON8NT, we were having a debate a few weeks ago here in another meeting about the difficulty of working through the ISS transponder. And I think you said, Jeff, you found it pretty difficult, if not impossible to get through. Is that your kind of experience of that?
That's absolutely true. And I think Tim more or less said the same. He has the luck that he has there to the west, you know, but here in Western Europe, so to say, the ESS is very, very difficult to work actually. And so I actually gave up. From time to time I'm listening, but I'm not using it anymore. Actually, I'm not using any FM satellites anymore. I'm more into FT4, which is quite, quite rewarding, and it's calm. It's calm,
Yes.
and on one pass you can work some Americans and some Europeans, and I even worked the United Arab Emirates Alpha 65 on RS-44, and there are two other satellites where you can use FT4, and that's the JO97, Juliet Oscar 97, and the Mike Oscar 122, Mike Oscar 122. Those are also working quite good, but they didn't have such a big footprint as the RS-44. But and I'm doing this with a simple V2000 vertical antenna because I simply don't have more place to put some beams up. So living on an apartment, you have to live with that reality. But anyway, it's working. So, and it's quite rewarding.
Yeah, you do really well, Jeff. By the way, Jeff, I just wanted to say something. Hope the others will excuse me. Thank you for the emails that you sent me, and I have tried replying, but for some reason your email provider is bouncing my emails. So I don't know why. So I'm not ignoring you. We'll have to try something else.
No problem.
I thought, while I've got you, I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's fun.
Nick.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Tim, and I was a member of a club a few years ago who decided to give satellite operating a bit of a try, and we made up a very simple bit of equipment, a camera tripod with a piece of timber going across the top, and fitted two antennas, one for 2 meters and one for 77s, and two Baofeng radios, one on 2 and one on 77s, and it worked exceptionally well. and of course it did solve the problem of trying to hold up an antenna in your hand for a long period of time, because it was pretty easy to follow it using the tripod.
Yeah, it's a good idea. A lot of, I think, I used to see sort of pictures of people using tripods, and I think that they work really well when the satellite's out on the horizon. It's not moving too fast. It gets a bit more alarming as it's coming straight overhead, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was down off the East Coast. So
No,
I think we were looking at at the horizon, and then missing out on the final bit because it's almost impossible to
yeah,
get the elevation right as they go over.
but you're right. You know, that's such a great. It's really simple. You know, you use a couple of low budget handhelds, a couple of aerials that you've probably got, a bit of photographic tripod, and a bit of wood. You've made your satellite station for not very much money at all. Fantastic.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't trying satellite radio the other week when I went working portable up on the Pennine Way, but a group of young kids came across doing a practice run for the Duke of Edinburgh with their teachers, and they were fascinated with what I was up to. And one of their questions, Tim, was how much did my aerial cost that I was using to talk to these people? They were listening to me working on 20 meters. And I said, I don't know, £25 maybe.
Yeah.
And they were astonished that you could make radio contacts with people in other parts of the world on something that was so exceptionally cheap. So I think the idea of a camera tripod and a batten of wood and a couple of antennas on it and 2 exceptionally cheap radios is probably the way to go if you're going to demonstrate it to kids.
Yeah, I like it. I have to try that.
Right. Anyone else with a question or comment to Tim tonight that hasn't had an opportunity yet? Yes, Stephen. Stephen, you're on mute. You'll have to unmute.
I've got a little Dorchester directory here, and it's got stargazing page. And apparently at the moment, there are quite a few satellites going from sort of west to southwest across the sky. ISS is visible most nights to the end of the month over Dorset, well, across the UK. The other ones that are mentioned that are visible, sorry, the light's getting a bit dim. Starlink satellite, Chinese Tiangong space station, NASA's solar sail, and even the Hubble satellites going across. They're visible this month.
It's if you're lucky enough to have dark skies, it's quite fascinating to if it, particularly this time of year, if it's nice and warm, to sit outside just watching the sky. And it's amazing how many satellites you see. The ISS is really, really bright. I'm sure many of you have watched the ISS go over, and that's really, really bright. But yeah, Starlink is you've got these sort of trains of satellites, which I think have upset quite a few astronomers quite reasonably, because they're bringing a lot of light into the sky where perhaps you'd prefer that there wasn't a lot of light. But I suppose for the casual observer, it could be quite interesting. But yeah, it's amazing what you can see in terms of visual satellites. And of course, it's quite fun if the ISS is going over to actually watch it and point your aerial. You know where you have to point your aerial, don't you? Quite good. But yeah, I think that's another thing. And thank you for mentioning it, Steve. It's quite interesting to watch satellites going over if you've got a clear sky. It's really good.
Yeah, I've watched the ISS twice this month already when I saw the article. And it's around about 10 o'clock at night, between 10 and 11 o'clock at night.
Okay. Well, that's Jeff. I completely agree with what Jeff says about the ISS crossband repeater being very difficult to use. But as it gets, actually, it'll be getting earlier, won't it, each night? But sort of beyond 11 o'clock at night, it can actually be relatively easy to get into it and quite fun.
Stephen, I've put into the chat, because I know you're a shortwave listener, I've put into the chat a link for your computer to enable you to get onto the QO100 web SDR. So this is the very, very good satellite to listen to, and you'll be able to listen to it on the computer there, and you can hear people making contacts through that satellite across the world. And Tim was making the point that, when there's a de-expedition somewhere, some of these guys are now operating satellites, or if you're like Emil DL8JJ, he's also doing moon bounce on some of the de-expeditions recently. In his most recent one in Africa, he was running moon bounce while he was out there on the de-expedition. But Stephen, have a look at that page I've sent you, which is the BATC, the British Amateur Television Club, and you'll see the web SDR on there, and you can have a listen to the satellite traffic there.
Oh, and actually Jan's just said ISS coming up. High pass starts around 2000 UTC, so about 4 minutes time. So it's probably here already, actually.
Well, it's a plus and minus, Tim. It will start at 8:15 UTC on my location in the Netherlands. So I think it's about 15, 20 minutes early over there.
Yeah.
But it should be visible. It's very high, very, very high pass.
Yeah, very good. Oh well, it's still well light here actually at the moment, but I won't see it. But a little bit further east, you might.
A couple of minutes later, and you can have another try.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and same problem here. We've got light and we've got a nice clear sky.
Yeah, but, I was looking outside, and well, it starts to get dark, but maybe too much lights to have a good look at it.
Yeah, unless it's got light shining off it, of course. But
yeah, it's possible that sun is indeed reflecting. And that you still see it. Okay, well, good luck. Give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, G6BND, yes, ham clock. I think you can. You're absolutely right. I think you can configure that to see various satellite passes and so on. So that's a good idea. Haven't played with ham clock. I know lots of people do, and there's all sorts of interesting information on there. And you can certainly
yeah, it's completely free. You can see it running behind me. It's completely free, and you can see when it will rise and when it will forward. You can see the path, like not quite, but it's a very high pass coming in over Wales, and it's just mid-Atlantic now. And you can select what satellites you want to see. It's a really lovely little program, and it's all free as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I should get that going sometime.
Yeah, unfortunately, the GoSat watch is a fairly pricey £9.99, isn't it?
Oh, has it gone up? Oh, no.
Yeah, it's gone up. Yeah.
Oh well, ISS detector it is then. I bought it a few years ago.
Yeah, go on, Stephen.
Hat Green works 2 meters and 70 centimeters.
Yeah.
FDR.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. So you'll be able to listen to the space station there.
Yeah. I don't know what aerials they've got on there, but I assume it's some sort of omnidirectional aerial. So you probably stand a chance of hearing something. Yeah, worth a go.
I'm doing it through the computer.
Yeah.
If you are portable in the field, some people do record their passes on a dictaphone or on a tape recorder, something like that, because you really are missing arms and hands. You have to direct your antenna. You have to change the frequency, like Tim, the five pre-programmed things. So you really are missing hands. So people just record that, and then afterwards at home they just log everything. I think that's a good idea.
It is a good idea. And sometimes I've not got a bad memory, and I generally remember who I've worked. But there have been times when I finished a satellite pass and think, who did I work? I can't remember, can't I?
Or I forgot to record.
Yeah, exactly.
That's even worse. But anyway, good preparation is everything. Well, I always say that to myself, but I'm not good in that. But
yeah, it's a good tip. It's a good tip, Jeff, because the problem, as Tim described it earlier, is that you've only got a very, very short window really to make these contacts or to listen. So it is. I think you're right. You're highly pressurized trying to point your antenna in the right direction and change frequency to listen to it because of Doppler, and at the same time, remember what on earth you're doing, and if you've made a QSO, who you've made it with.
If you have an old smartphone and you install just recorder app on that, you are done.
Yeah,
I think, because the time will be recorded and so on. So yeah, dictaphones are not expensive anymore either. But anyway, with an old smartphone that you still have laying around.
Yeah, I've used an old Olympus when ISS was coming over, and here's a sample.
About 3.5 months, and we'll stay
Excellent.
until February. So it's like a school year to be up here. Over.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
And recorded the whole of Tin Peak while he was up there on a downlink, while I was driving between Taunton and Frome in the mobile using a 5100 and this.
Yeah, it works really well. Yeah, I've been surprised mobile. You suddenly hear this really loud American voice. Whoa, where's that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, someone's put in the chat, Anthony, I used an SDR and a Yankee antenna, what that is, to listen to the output of the NOAA satellites and then converting the sound to overhead images. It's great to track the passes of satellites.
Oh, that's yeah, the NOAA satellites. I think that's WeatherFax, isn't it, or something like that? Or weather.
Yeah, it's the weather satellites. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite fun to play with.
Yes, us radio hams are fascinated with weather as well, aren't we?
Yeah.
weather and the sun.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone with any other questions to Tim?
Hi Tim, great presentation. Where can I download the slides? Just for personal use.
Oh no, it's absolutely fine. No problem at all. I don't know how you want to do it. If you drop me an email at GW4VXE at iCloud.com, I'll send you a PDF of the slides with pleasure.
Tim, if you drop one over to me as well, then any members that ask me, I can pass the info.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Save you being bothered by it.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Good question, Michael. Okay, if we've got no one else, I would very much like to thank Tim for a really nice introduction tonight. So thank you very much, Tim. Can we show our appreciation to Tim in the normal way, everyone?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. That was really good, Tim. Very enjoyable, and I hope we've inspired one or two people to go off and have a play here that they haven't yet done. And I just say to you that for those of us that are very keen to get young people interested in amateur radio, particularly if we get the opportunity ever to go into a school, my daughter, my youngest child, is a science teacher in a secondary school in Liverpool, and she's run some of the STEM classes there, and she told me the two things they're absolutely fascinated with is Morse code and satellites. Something very old, Morse code, the concept of it, and satellites, something extremely modern and miles up in space, are the two things that really engage the kids. And she, I know, has done some work in some of her science classes on, looking at satellites and looking at astronomy more generally, really, as a as a subject. So I think if anyone here ever gets the opportunity to go into a school, a youth club, you know, a scouting group locally where you live, then do take that opportunity and, you know, make contact with people like us and with Tim and some of our other speakers, because all the speakers we've had at the club here, Tim, have all been fantastic in following through emails from people and you know, saying that they'll make things available, and they do. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant stuff.
Okay, on that, thank you very much. I'm going to say good night as well to the people watching us on YouTube, but so I'll cut the YouTube link as well, and we'll end that. So thank you very much. And I'm also going to stop the recording. So good night to everyone who's caught up with this later in the week. Hope you've enjoyed Tim's talk and it's inspired you to have a play with satellites, or at least go off and have a listen to one of the SDRs and see what you can hear.
Great.